Right. So this is my first live stream in a very long time. Hope that the sound is good. I don't quite know how to tell, but um, so my name is Rod Graham, and I'm your neighborhood sociologist. You can follow me on Twitter at Roderick Graham. And what I'll be doing occasionally on Twitter, YouTube, and Facebook, and maybe LinkedIn, if I can get connected to it, is offer a sociological analysis of things that are going on in society. And so for this first one, I'm going to be talking about the power plays of the Republican Party. So those that know me or follow me on Twitter or read any of my writing, they'll know that I'm a progressive, that I'm firmly on the left. Um, and so, my focus is usually on trying to understand what's wrong with the right. And so this latest piece that I wrote for the editorial board talks about all of these little ways. Actually, they're big ways. I shouldn't say little ways. All these ways, maybe just ways. All of these ways that the Republican Party is trying to take power without doing it legitimately through people giving them that power through voting, right? And so first I'm going to list all of those and kind of talk about them a little bit. And then after doing that, I'll explain why they're doing this. So you probably heard people talk about this authoritarian bent that the Republican Party is currently showing, especially since Trump came in office. I think it's intensified, but I think even before then, the Republican Party was seen as being more authoritarian. You've probably even heard people talk about them being fascist, right? And so those are, these kind of vague ways of talking about what's going on. But I wanted to talk about specific things, like what exactly they are doing and why it's bad. And sure, in broad strokes, you can call that fascism or totalitarianism. But it's going to just look at these specific things, right? And I'm calling these specific things power plays. All right. So let's take the first, voter suppression. Okay. Now, we've heard about this. We've heard about voter ID laws. We've heard about that crazy law in Georgia where you can't give someone food and water if they're standing in the voting lines, standing in line to vote, right? And these are all these subtle ways to put some resistance between the voter and the ballot box. And the more resistance that you put, the less likely certain groups are going to vote. Those certain groups tend to vote Democratic. So one objection that people make about this is they say, well, I mean, the law applies equally, right? If they're asking for two forms of ID now, well, everyone has to provide two forms of ID. So how is this racist? How is this hurting Democrats specifically, right? That's of course a very intentionally naive analysis. Laws always impact populations differently, and so lawmakers will craft a certain law to affect a population in a better or worse way. So these voter suppression laws are really meant to make it more difficult for Democratic voters who are likely to vote Democrat make it to the polls. Okay. Well, I mean, the more you do that, the less you're getting a representative sample of the population going to the polls, right? And Republicans know that. They know that they are not the majority party. They know that they're and this gets to the end of the story in a way, because this is what I'll be talking about. They know that the size of the Republican population, the likely Republican voter, is shrinking relative to the likely Democratic voter. So what they want to do is make sure that those Democrats don't go to the polls. So that's the first thing. The second is gerrymandering. Okay. Well, what that means is most of people who would watch me know what that means. But for those who don't know, it means that when you draw a district up, right, like what representative will represent a particular district, you have to draw the lines. Well, you draw those lines in some weird way so that you ensure that your party will always get elected. So you draw the lines of a district so that it's filled with so many Republicans and so few Democrats until you're always going to have a Republican representing that district, and you'll always have a Republican going to the White House. And I have an example here of the most gerrymandered state, which is North Carolina. Let me see if I can pull this up. It's my first time using this software, Restream, but it's really good. So yeah, here we go. All right. So this is this is North Carolina in the 2014 elections, state elections, and these are some weird districts. So what they've done is they've crammed the Republicans into, in this weird way, have drawn three districts for Republicans. Now, likely what's going on, I'm not a resident of North Carolina, but my guess is that in districts 1, 4, and 12, which I think is where the is where the Democrats are. Well, we know that's where the Democrats are, but I think those are very populous districts, populous areas. So if they would say, for example, 12 here, if they would include people from this area in districts 5 or 8, that might swing those districts because these are probably rural districts. So what you do is you take a very populous area where that's where many Black people will be and where many wealthier people, younger people, more educated people live. You take those urban districts and you sort of draw them tightly so that they won't spill out into those less populous red areas. It's gerrymandering, and it's crazy. There's no reason why those districts should be drawn like that. Now, both parties do that. Both parties do that. But what's happened is in the last census, the growth in the population, in the American population, was with minorities. So white folks are decreasing. And furthermore, that growth is in certain states. So that's, I believe, California, Texas, Florida, and one other. I think it's Georgia, but I'm not entirely sure. In any case, there's growth in those states, okay? In those same states, Republicans control redistricting. So it's probably not Georgia right now, but it's 4 states that have grown the most. In fact, I can look it up right now. It is Georgia, Texas, Florida, North Carolina, not California, and Georgia. In those states, Republicans control redistricting. And so they're working hard at gerrymandering those districts to make sure that even as the population rises, Democratic population rises, they can keep their seats. Okay, so the third power play is overturning elections. Now, this didn't happen. Luckily, it didn't happen, but they wanted it to. It's amazing. I mean, this would have been the pinnacle of a power play, right? It's really saying, okay, the people voted for this person. We don't like it. We don't want to lose power, so we're just gonna say the elections are a fraud, right? And so the New York Times posted the list of people the list of Republicans who voted to decertify, who didn't want to certify the elections, even after the January 6th insurrection attempt. So let me show this here. So 147 Republicans voted to overturn election results. It's amazing. It's astonishing. These people knew that there was no voter fraud, or whatever voter fraud there was, it was minimal. They knew that, and they didn't care. They just wanted to keep power, right? I mean, and the Times just posted. It's really it's a small piece. If you want to find it online, and you can read it. But all these folks said, no, the election results are problematic. Let's keep Trump in office. It's crazy. It's crazy. Okay, so those are the standard things that you hear when people talk about the Republican Party being fascist or authoritarian. Those are certainly 3 power plays. But I want to talk about some more things too. Actually, it's not just those 3 things. Those things are important. Those are, I guess, the big ticket items in a way. But I think that there's more. So another one, and this happened with Trump, but I think it's going to continue, is rejecting the media. So Donald Trump didn't like the fact that the Washington press corps was doing their job, that they were chronicling his events. They're supposed to do that. I mean, the media, the press, is an important element in democracy. It's the link between an average Joe like me and my representative. So Donald Trump didn't like the fact that the Washington press corps and other journalists were not covering him favorably, and so he simply revoked their press passes. Don't talk to me. I mean, that guy was a clown, right? But he just revoked their press passes. Now, I think he set a precedent that will continue, but it's a power play because what's happening is the governing or the erstwhile governors now, because they're out of office, at least the presidential office, they want to sever the ties between what they're doing, actually doing, and the people that they're supposed to be governing. They don't want to be held accountable, right? So that's one, rejecting the media. Here's a new one I saw recently: refusing to debate. Uh, it's kind of weird, but apparently, the Republican National Committee claims that the Commission on Presidential Debate is biased towards Republicans. And so they are threatening to pull out of presidential debates. Now that's quite something. They're basically, I don't know, maybe it's biased. I don't really think so. Most of the presidential debates that I've seen has just been fairly impartial. Not even fairly. I mean, the way that I've seen it, the Republican candidate and the Democratic candidate have had their time to talk. I don't think the questions were unfair. Nothing like that. This is just a power play because they want to sever the tie between them and the people. They want to rule, but they don't want to be held accountable for it. And then a third is truth bans. So I might do another. In fact, I will. I think I'll do another live stream about CRT and what it means. But I'm using the term truth bans more broadly because what you've got Republican legislators who are attempting to keep a certain narrative in place so that the American people won't see what's bad in society and maybe want to change it, because that would lead to voting progressive. I mean, the more you learn about the things that have happened in this country, the more likely you are to see things from a leftist perspective. So if you learn, to give an example, if you learn about systemic racism and you don't just have this triumphalist, meritocratic, pull yourself up by your bootstraps type of understanding of the world, then that will lend you a lot of times, to look at policies from the left. And so this is a power play. They want to suppress those ideas. They want to hide the truth from the American people. Of course, they'll say it's all about divisiveness, right? And that sounds, reasonable. Yeah, well, I mean, we don't want to be divisive, but that's not what it is. That's not what's happening. The more young people learn about Native American genocide, about systemic racism, about any of these things, the history of sexism in this country, how queer folks have been treated, they will then grow up to be voters who will worry about those things. And the Republican Party doesn't want that. Okay. So I've gone through several power plays, right? I went through voter suppression. You know about that one. I went through gerrymandering. You know about that one. I went through the overturning of elections, or at least attempting to. I went through rejecting the media. I went through refusing to debate. And then I did truth bans. Okay. Now, the sociological analysis. Why? So there have always been two major parties in this country, or at least since maybe the late 1800s. There used to be several, but I think after Lincoln's election, we started to move to a rigid two-party system. So It's always been two-party system, but both parties wanted to govern with authority. They didn't want to just have power. Um, both parties, and I'm sure some historian can say, well, wait a minute, Rod, you're forgetting about this. But I think generally, both parties had the same ideals about our democracy as a free, fair elections, connecting with the people, explaining what they're doing to the people, negotiating with the press. This has been normal throughout history until now. Why is this party doing this now? What's the deal? To me, it's about precarity. There's a general sense by people on the right, um, a general sense, and also it's an empirical fact that they are not only the minority party, but becoming even more so the minority party. To the extent that people of color continue to vote disproportionately for Democrats, and to the extent that people of color continue to gain in population compared to white Americans, it means that Republican Party is in trouble. And it's not just that. It's not just the growth in the population in terms of who's being born. It's also the case that Republicans tend to be older as well. So there's a sort of demographic cliff that's coming where you've got people right now who are Reagan Republicans, right? And they're the one, and they're always voting. They're very politically active. They're going to make, no matter what voter ID laws or voter laws are in place, they're going to make it to the ballot box, right? So they're very stable, and that's why Republicans keep winning because of that. Well, eventually, those folks are not going to be here, and so when that happens, do they have younger people in a large enough size of younger people to replace that group? The answer is no. So this is like precarious, like it's kind of fear at this point, right? They're trying to hold on to something, and so they're doing it any way they can. They know that a free and fair election, where where citizens understand the things in play, where citizens know what it is that each party is trying to accomplish, they know that in those situations, they're not going to fare well. So they have to do these things. They have to lie. They got to do the truth bans. They got to talk about disinformation. They got to put all these moral panics out. They have to do those things because if they didn't, they wouldn't be here. We wouldn't have many Republicans, or we'd have far fewer Republicans in state legislatures. And I don't even think we would have a Republican president. As bad as Biden is doing right now, as low as his numbers are, quite frankly, if Democrats vote, they will always outnumber Republicans, and they will continue to do so. And that's the problem. Okay, so this has been fun. This is my first live stream in a long time. I wanted to keep it kind of short, under 20 minutes. It looks like I'm at the 18-minute mark now, so that's awesome. So if you're watching this on Twitter, follow me. If you're watching this on YouTube, subscribe. If you're seeing this somewhere else, I hope it's on LinkedIn, but I'm not sure. If you're seeing it on Facebook, subscribe to the page, and so you'll be seeing more of these in the future. Thanks for watching.